The Eastern and Southern African region has made considerable progress in reducing new HIV infections among adults. Significant progress was made in the prevention of mother-to-child transmission of HIV and scale-up of HIV treatment. Despite these gains, since 2010, the number of new HIV infections among adults has stalled and failing to decline for at least 5 years in the majority of countries in the region. In 2015, there were approximately 910,000 new HIV infections in the Eastern and Southern African region among adults, which account for almost half of the global total. Nearly 40% of new HIV infections in the region during 2015 were just in South Africa, and another 50% occurred in the other 8 countries. The number of new infections remains unacceptably high among adolescent girls and young women between the ages of 10 and 24 years and their male sexual partners. In 2015, there were approximately 4,500 new HIV infections per week in the region among adolescent girls and young women, double that of adolescent boys and young men. Key populations such as sex workers, men who have sex with men, transgender people, people who inject drugs, and prison inmates also experience high HIV prevalence. In the 2016 political declaration, the regional target for Eastern and Southern African region is to reduce new HIV infections to 210,000 by 2020. In order to achieve this regional target, countries must close the tap of new HIV infections amongst adolescent girls and young women, their male sexual partners, and key populations. This requires countries to refocus and revitalize their HIV prevention efforts and continue to scale up HIV treatment. To revitalize HIV combination prevention in the Eastern and Southern African region requires 2 levels of action and shifts: leadership level action and shifts, and technical level action and shifts. Leadership level action and shifts would require accountability shifts for HIV prevention programs at national and local levels. Countries must also shift the magnitude of investments and invest sufficiently for HIV prevention. For technical actions and shifts, countries should apply the location and population approach for programming implementation and for investments. Shifts in coverage and scale-up of these high-impact pillars are critical to revitalizing HIV prevention. In the 2016 political declaration, there are specific targets for each of these pillars to be achieved by 2020. Countries should generate and disseminate routine program data on these pillars for improvement of program implementation. To revitalize HIV prevention requires galvanizing political leadership, civil society, communities, regional entities, and development partners for their collective action. To this end, under the leadership of the government of Zimbabwe, a ministerial side meeting for the Eastern and Southern African region was held in May 2016 on the sidelines of the 69th World Health Assembly.
Yes, I did become the champion in the region. 3 strategies we used in Zimbabwe. The first strategy was prevention. And the second strategy was prevention. And the third strategy was the prevention. And that has worked well.
We are calling upon our countries to be able to look at the issue of prevention and rallying call around the UNAIDS so that we can be able to address this in key populations, especially adolescents and young women.
To say to the leaders that when you have 2 million new infections every year and almost 63% of those new infections occurring in Africa, you will not win against the epidemic, showing to the world that we are failing to our young adolescent girls.
Working in isolation doesn't work. Different sectors working together will make a difference.
We need to consider significantly the combination of the different prevention mechanisms that countries want to implement.
There need to be that bridge between us, the political leaders, and the people who implement the programs on the ground. and more importantly, the community. We need to set the targets together with the community and other stakeholders.
I feel that I take decisions about that whole thing about sex and protecting myself, looking at it from the point of view of the future.
It is actually good for key populations to having platforms actually from the corners of the world to also brainstorm the accessing of the universal healthcare services.
The moment a country has political commitment, we can do a lot of change.
It's all about leadership at every level, from the individual to the family, the neighbors, the community, the local authority, whether it's a chief or a councillor, local priest, a businessman, and traditional and faith leaders.
We will not stop also new infection if we don't invest resources in prevention. We need at least 1/4 of the total resources.
We've worked with many countries to ensure the mainstreaming of an integration of HIV and sexual and reproductive health.
From this side meeting, we saw that ministers were able to agree on a roadmap. We have a very great convening power. So one of the things that we plan to do at country level, but also at regional level, is to convene civil society.
The 2016 International AIDS Conference in Durban, South Africa, was another platform to galvanize partners.
This political commitment now will be translated to close the tap, as the call by the Minister of Health of Zimbabwe, in making sure that prevention will have the same emphasis that we are putting today on treatment.
Let's close the tap of new HIV infections and revitalize HIV prevention in the Eastern and Southern African region.